welcome to a brand new episode of The Partial Historians. I am Dr. Rad.
And I am Dr. Greenfield. Hello and welcome.
My name is getting shorter as we're getting further into the podcast.
Mine's getting longer because I'm a weirdo.
You're always very formal at the beginning.
I am. I then loosen up. It takes me like 5 minutes.
Get a couple of drinks into this one, listeners.
Hello. Maybe that should be our next podcast, Drunken Roman History.
Drunken Roman History. Okay, so, listeners, if you're joining us for the first time, we are tracing the journey of Rome from the founding of the city. And we had quite a dramatic episode last time. It was all about Appius Claudius.
Oh, what a man.
Yeah, exactly. So, Appius Claudius is super patrician, and he's generally behaved like a total douche throughout our podcast episodes of late. But, sadly or not sadly, depending on which side of the conflict of the orders you're on, he died. Again, not sure how. Maybe suicide?
Tragically?
Not really
Question
sure.
mark?
Cringe?
Anyway, he's dead.
Yeah, he's dead now. And what happened just towards the end of the last episode was that there was a bit of debate about whether he should have this grand honorific funeral, as would be the norm for someone of his status. And surprisingly, the plebs came to his defense. Plebs, what were you thinking?
You got to still be a stickler for tradition.
I guess.
I mean, you can dislike the man, but you got to love the system.
I like it. All right, so that's where we were up to last time. We actually didn't. That wasn't like the end of the year that we were looking at last time, whatever year that was.
No, that was just the most dramatic moment. Our dates don't line up at all.
No.
So for Dionysius, this is around about 470. But for Livy...
I feel like it's in the 460s, but I'm quite easy breezy at this time of the Republic. Wait till it gets a bit further on, and then I'll start getting more...
These numbers are going to catch up with us at some point.
Yeah. Anywho, so, Dr. G.
So we've got our consuls for the year.
Yes.
We've got Lucius Valerius, and he's actually decided to take a whole bunch of the army east against the Aequians.
Yes.
And we also have Tiberius Aemilius Mamercus.
I love that name.
And he's heading to the northeast against the Sabines.
Nice. Traditional enemies, we've talked about them muchly.
Yeah, so Rome is in this continuing phase, narratively speaking. And, I mean, historically, yes, but also we can't be sure how much our narratives are matching up to the actuality in this point in time. But there is this sort of like 200-year period of history where Rome is trying to establish itself as the top dog in the region.
Definitely.
And this means that when Dionysius and Livy come to write these narratives, they've got to have war after war and campaign after campaign.
Oh, there's a lot. There is a lot. They certainly had their calendars booked out back in this stage. I think I'd like to rename this period, Dr. G. I think I'd like to call it the Energizer Bunny of the Republic because they just keep going and going and going.
It is incredible. And sometimes, you know, the campaigns go quite quickly and we're about to reach a stretch of those from Dionysius' perspective. So that's exciting because he usually has like these really big speeches that he gives to characters, and I don't have any of that coming up in the next little while.
Really?
I know.
I was reading my Livy and I actually thought to myself last night, poor Dr. G, she's probably got pages and pages of speeches to read.
No, not this time. What I do have is the quick dispatchment of the Aequians.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they come to engagement on a number of occasions with the Roman forces.
Right, yeah.
But they receive many wounds and they flee.
Okay, I've got something similar happening in that they basically are refusing not to fight. But there also seems to be a bit of divine signs going on as well.
Oh, yes. I was saving that part of the narrative.
Sorry, yeah. I know how much you like it.
Go there.
It was a dark and stormy night. Or day. Probably day. What seems to happen is that after the Aequians are, not putting up a great show, the Romans decide to actually attack their camp, which makes sense. But a storm comes along and the Romans decide that this seems to be... So they retreat. Then the Romans decide, because the weather clears up very quickly after they retreat, that this must be a divine sign. So the storm was just there while they were attacking, went away when they retreated. Is that similar?
Oh, yeah. So, they have this... There's this moment where darkness descends upon the sky and you're like, well, it must be daytime. Otherwise, that's a bit weird. Unless it's just normal nighttime and everyone's freaking out. And they're like, what's the sun setting? So all of a sudden this darkness comes. There's this heavy rain. And then there's lightning and thunder.
Yeah. high-tech sound effects.
Sound effects from my mouth. And then all of a sudden the army goes back and the sky clears. And they're like, oh my gods.
I really hope that there was someone going... And now I'm close to the camp, and now I'm far away from the camp. Now I'm close to the camp, and now I'm far away from the camp. Just watching the clouds go in, out.
So as far as this narrative is concerned, there seem to be some augurs involved. So maybe you could have an augur walking up. Ooh, clouds. Walking back, no clouds. It's a sign. I see. It's distinctly a sign. They've read the signs. Usually augurs read signs of birds using auspicium, the seeing of the birds.
Yeah.
And... so whatever happens to the birds in a thunderstorm, presumably that's fairly observable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, would the birds disappear?
Yeah.
The birds come back?
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so it's like da 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 da
the
da
skies
da
have
da
cleared. I can fly again.
So instead, in my account, the Romans decide that they're going to take out all the aggression that they've built up on the Aequians' lands rather than the camp, because the camp is clearly protected by the god. Or a god of some description.
Somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Which then takes us straight to how Emilius is doing against the Sabines.
Yeah. My note here is basic stalemate.
It does seem a bit like that. The Sabines are hanging out behind their walls, walls of the city. So again, the Romans seem to vent their anger on the lands around Sabine territory.
Oh, okay. So from Dionysius' perspective, there seems to be a pitched battle that takes place over at least 6 hours, beginning at noon and lasting till sunset.
Oh, not according
With
to
not
my
ne'er a storm in sight.
Not on my account. On my account, they start attacking the Sabine lands and they start burning the fancy houses and the villages that are around there. And this provokes the Sabines, and so that sort of gets them to give battle, because clearly they're not thrilled at the prospect of everything being burnt.
It seems fairly inconclusive in any case, because the narrative kind of cuts off. After a time, they struck their tents and withdrew their forces.
Yeah, Livy says fairly clearly that there is no progress made.
Guys, it's the end of the fighting season and it's time to go home.
We're just going to pack up and hit the tracks.
It's a shame, but we found nothing.
Well, yeah, what a letdown after Appius's grand demise. Nothing really happens.
The rest of the year is kind of boring except for a thunderstorm.
Yeah, that's right. So that brings me to the next year, where the consuls seem to be Titus Numicius. Sorry, God, damn these names. Titus Numicius Priscus and Aulus Virginius, or Virginius, if we're being
Virginius.
Virginius, that's right.
Yes, I have these two dudes. From my perspective, we've also got an extra name, Aulus Virginius Caeliomontanus.
I was going to leave that to you.
Of the Caelian Mount. Yeah. So of that particular branch of the family.
I like it.
They've got a view.
They're definitely both patricians.
Oh, yes.
That I can say for sure.
Big-time patricians.
So, in their consulship, unlucky for them, the agrarian law issue comes forth yet again. The plebeians, of course, are saying, so, once again, guys, you've delayed and delayed and delayed doing the agrarian law. What's happening with that? And things are, again, building to a fever pitch. Will they or won't they? It's like Ross and freaking Rachel in the city of Rome at the moment.
That is a reference for people of the Gen X and the millennial crowd.
I'm not revealing my childhood at all. Anywho, and so, yes, they are building to this fever pitch where it seems that some sort of, brawl is going to break out, civil war might happen. But external forces come in to distract the Romans again. Is this similar to how the conflict plays out in your account?
No.
Okay, all right, well, hit me with it, Dionysius.
Look, we've got some land allotment crises conflict coming up, but it's not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. We have this moment where, as far as the situation at the start of this circa 469 is concerned, they basically just rustle up some armies and get to it. And it seems that the Volscians are a problem right now.
Yes.
And they're quite close to Rome.
This is what distracts them from the agrarian law in my account. The fact that the Volscians start attacking territory around Rome. And kind of doing what to the Romans what they'd just been doing to the Sabines, like burning country houses, that kind of thing. There are Romans seeking refuge because, it's not safe to be outside, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And so, this continuing process of conflict where everybody's sort of at each other backwards and forwards.
Yes, exactly.
Someone has a victory, somebody retreats.
Yep.
There is mention of a guardhouse of the Romans in this particular narrative where...
Do tell.
Yeah. So it seems that now that they've got this idea of defensive structures, which kind of went terribly wrong with the Fabii.
Right. Yeah.
They do seem to have these other defensive buildings that they've put up. Either as a result of that situation or they've been inspired. They're like, you know what, we could build more defensive structures. Who knew?
I think it does testify, generally it testifies to a lot of conflict going on if your city needs walls and guardhouses and that sort of thing. Because you're just being attacked so goddamn often.
So there's this little outpost of the Romans, this little guardhouse, and it gets assaulted by the Volscii.
Right.
And they send out some horses and men on horses to try and find out what's going on.
Just the horses.
Just the horses.
Mr. Ed.
I mean, you'll be right. You're a smart horse. You love peanut butter. And the horse comes back and goes, no, I can't find anything. So they go out and they try to look and they're not really sure. And while that's happening, the fort is getting plundered and burnt behind them, essentially, it would seem.
Okay.
Yeah,
so that's what's getting burnt.
Yeah, something's gone wrong there.
Yeah.
And so the consuls decide that they should probably go back to the city at that point.
Right. Defend the city, yeah.
Yeah, and then re-strategize. So we have Numicius.
I know. It looks like it should be easy to pronounce, but then when
it's not. No.
When you're halfway through, you're like, just phlegm. It's just phlegm.
Numicius. No.
I think it's Numicius. Yeah.
So for your listenership, it's Numicius, and the one in the middle, that I in the middle, should be a long I. And so, Numicius.
Yeah.
And if it's a short I, Numicius.
Yeah.
But it's really a matter of where you want to put the emphasis. And there's some controversy about that.
Well, I know that Numicius or Numicius wants to put the emphasis on the Volscians.
He certainly does. So he's like, you know what? I see those Volscii and I'm going to head in their direction.
Yeah. So in Livy's account, the Volscians seem to have almost just been attacking the territory just to terrorize the Romans, and then they backed off. But of course, the Romans can't let sleeping dogs lie. And so Numicius is going to be dispatched to fight the Volscians, heading in the direction of Antium. And the other consul, Virginius, is going to be sent against the Aequians again.
The complexities. So importantly, Antium is one of the major Volscian cities.
It is,
and it is relatively far from Rome, further away than Veii.
I was having a look on the old map today, and it does actually seem to be a bit of a coastal town.
It is a coastal town.
Yeah.
It's just south of Ardea, which is one of these regions which speaks a completely different language in this period to any of the others. Yeah, weird.
What a lonely little existence.
So you've got these little imports in Ardea, and then just south you've got the Volscian stronghold of Antium.
Yeah. Antium definitely seems like it's going to be a major theme of the next couple of years for me.
So the Romans are heading down.
Yeah.
And this is pretty bad from a Volscian perspective because they actually are pillaging as they go, kind of, and they take some coastal towns as well, which are feeder towns for Antium.
Yeah.
So, and they take over these little ports.
Ports are always obviously bad things to lose because presumably you are relying on goods of various kinds coming through the ports to get to the inner territories.
Yes, and the Volscians, being clever as they were, aren't keeping all of their shipping equipment in Antium because that's obviously a stronghold and relatively vulnerable. So they've got them scattered around in these other coastal regions as well. And Rome is now just coming through and taking those and taking the equipment, which is a little bit scary if you're a Volscian, I think.
Yeah, well, Livy definitely seems to be quite happy with the way the Volscian campaign is started at first, which is in quite a contrast to the campaign against the Aequians, Dr. G, let me tell you. So it seems that Virginius is not particularly careful whilst journeying out against the Aequians, and the army ends up being sort of falling into a trap, essentially, and the consul himself is in danger. The whole army is basically in massive amounts of danger. But they're only really rescued by, typically Roman, the bravery of a few who managed to see them through. Ooh. So yes, so Virginius is not doing too well, but yes, you're right. The Volscian campaign seems to be doing pretty well for the Romans.
No, this is quite interesting because I feel like we're at a point where there's a real divergence in our source material.
Yeah.
Because from Dionysius's perspective,
yes,
Virginius going against the Aequians, there is a sense in which they get ambushed in the woods.
Right, yeah.
And then they turn it around really quickly. And
it's only like a line in mine. It's not like a big thing, but it definitely seems like it was... Livy's playing up the drama, I would presume, where he's like, they almost died, but then a few came to their rescue. Amazing!
That does sound more dramatic and exciting than the particular version I have here. And it just says, the Aequians lost many of their men.
Okay, all right. Dionysius being unusually concise. I appreciate it. Yeah, I definitely have far more detail about the Volscian campaign because, clearly the little sideline with Virginius is not that big a deal. He's just mentioning,
Yeah, so we get this sense that after we've got, the Aequians and the Volscii who are being dealt with,
yes.
The two consuls then meet up, and they're kind of in the similar region because the Aequians are to the east and the Volscii to the southeast.
And it does seem like the way that things are heading for me for the next couple of years is that there's going to be a bit of an alliance happening between these two. In that they're going to be teaming up, I think, a little bit. So exactly.
Foreshadowing.
Nothing like double teaming the Romans.
Foreshadowing the narrative. So they have the consuls get together and they burn some fortresses that they find that belong to Antium, so the Volscii.
Yeah.
And then it seems like once they're satisfied with the situation there, they then turn around and move against the Sabines as well.
Yes.
Seems to be a busy military year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my account, they deliberately choose not to attack Antium because it is a stronghold. And they go for the weaker town of either Keno or almost like Chino.
Ooh, I'm not sure about the name of this one.
Yeah. I think it would be Keno, but I'm not sure. And whilst they're doing this, the Sabines have obviously decided, quick, the Romans' backs are turned, let's attack. And so they start attacking Roman territory, obviously while they feel like the consuls are engaged elsewhere with other business. And again, quite threatening because they seem to be getting quite close to the city.
So you have to visualize a moving chessboard.
I mean, honestly, I get exhausted with these sorts of years because it's just... It really is just the Romans running here, running there, running everywhere, fighting all the same people.
Yes, but things are about to get slightly more complex. So this is, we're going to up the ante on the complexity here because, as you say, the Volscii and the Aequians are about to start to band together.
Which is clever of them. In fact, they shouldn't have taken so long.
I don't know why it took them so long to think of this. Was it because they were also fighting each other?
Yes. Well, I think in my account, the thing is, so obviously the Romans have to go and deal with the Sabines, and so the consuls defeat them and put that to bed. But it comes back to the conflict of the orders a little bit for me, as we're about to pass into the other year. I don't know whether Dionysius flags this. But the plebeians, in spite of all the external distraction, which is usually enough to, keep them off topic for a while, they have come back and they're still really angry that there's been no progress made for them.
Surprise, surprise.
Exactly, yeah. So much so that they actually refuse to ascend the assembly. Attend the assembly. Classic. Where the election of the consuls would be taking place. And so the consuls of the next year end up being voted in by the patricians and their dependents only.
Oh, now this is a detail that's completely unavailable in Dionysius' narrative.
Well, I don't want to brag, but that's how Livy do.
I'm interested. More details.
Unfortunately, as usual, he provides me with more detail. All he tells me is that the people that were elected were Titus Quintius and Quintus Servilius.
Okay. So we've got this sense in which only patricians are voting them in.
Yes. And their dependents, which I presume is obviously
clients and things like that.
Yeah.
And all of the plebeians have just failed to turn up for this.
I guess, I guess the message is that
This
what's the
doesn't
point?
seem-
You don't listen to us anyway?
Well, it doesn't seem like much of a power play, though.
I know.
Like,
It's like,
where
we're
would
going
they
to
get-
let you elect who you want, which is what you want.
Yeah. And, like, where did they get that advice from?
I wonder if it's just a look.
Is there a mole in the tribunes?
It does seem odd, but I can kind of see where they're coming from, in the sense of, we're just not going to take, like, what's the point of us even trying to take part in this system? Like, we may as well have another day at home rather than even bother showing up, because our voice is not valued at all. I kind of get that might be the...
You get tired of fighting.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it. I can kind of see that might be where they're coming from, but yeah, Livy doesn't really tell me much more about their motives for doing so. And obviously, yeah, it massively backfires.
Yeah, this is not going to end well. You're going to let the patricians vote in some consuls. I mean, guess who they're going to put in charge?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, but the thing is, even if they were there, I mean, who's going to get elected? It's going to be patrician.
Oh, look, yeah, we have had a bad run with consulships.
Yeah, we haven't got to that point yet where, you know, the plebs really have a...
It's just a choice between one bad guy and another bad guy.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. But I think there are some potential extra names for these guys. Do you have some extra names? For or have you still got some more details from the previous years?
No, I don't think I do. I was just flicking through my notes being like, do I have anything on land allotments? And I really don't. It's just basically backwards and forwardsing around in the local vicinity against various enemies.
Okay, cool.
And...
Well, Titus Quintius, or Quintius, however you want to go for it, seems to have the extra names of Capitolinus Barbatus associated with his...
Yes, I have those names for him, yep.
Yeah, and it seems that he is going to have quite the distinguished career. So he's one to watch, ladies and gents.
Remember this name.
We know that you're keeping score at home.
Quintius Capitolinus Barbatus.
You've all got the fasty inscribed on your bedroom walls, and you're just following along. And for Quintus Servilius, it seems that Structus Priscus are the other names associated with him.
Yeah, so, I mean, both of these guys are fairly important in the sense that they're both patrician.
Yeah.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that Titus Quintius has been consul before in 471.
Yes, exactly.
So he's got a previous consulship under his belt. Consul for the second
recent.
time.
Yeah.
You may remember him from previous episodes. Quintus Servilius Structus Priscus. I've got Structus in brackets because there seems to be a bit of a question mark about that name.
There always is, isn't there? Yeah.
And in my further research around Dionysius, I had a note that was like apparently not voted by the plebeians but only the patricians, which I think must be the thing you're talking about from Livy.
That is the thing.
And so we've got these two guys. They're very excited.
Well, and I think you can tell by the way that Livy is dealing with things, just like you were saying that Dionysius has cut back on the speeches a little bit in these wars that we're going through at the moment. But I feel like Livy is starting to get a bit sick of the conflict with the orders himself, because he says that they had a very similar year in that it started off with civil strife, and then civil strife was put on the back burner because of foreign wars. And that's all he tells me. There's no more theatrics going on here, really.
That is an amazing level of detail. That is literally all he tells you. Wow.
Yeah. So I feel like he's also getting a bit like, oh my god.
Come on, guys.
Deal with the agrarian problem.
I said I'd write this history and I said it would be annual, but I'm so bored. Okay, well.
Yeah, so he hops basically straight into the foreign conflicts.
Okay.
Not dealing with the conflict with the orders at all, really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even have anything to do with there being any internal strife at Rome. That's how little Dionysius is willing to deal with that right now.
Yeah, exactly. They're all over it.
They talk about offering vows to the gods and performing the lustration of the army and then setting out. And it's like, but wait a minute, don't you usually have to get people into the army? All of that's just completely glossed over now.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. Apparently we've got one and we're marching against the Sabines.
Yes.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
So Servilius goes and lays waste to the Sabine territory.
Yes.
The Sabines don't come out for battle, and they just sort of watch from a distance. They remain inside their fortresses.
Yes, I once again got the Sabines annoyingly staying behind their walls.
Yeah, and they're just watching while the Romans go through and lay waste to the land, steal the crop.
And run off with all their men and cattle.
Yeah, the slaves and the cattle. The Romans retired from their country entirely at their ease.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be a bit of a stalemate situation in that Servilius, although he's obviously captured a lot of stuff, he's not really having much luck in taking on the main Sabine army, and therefore, it's just, we burnt a lot of stuff, we captured a lot of stuff.
We did some things.
Yeah.
It could have been more exciting if the enemy turned up, but they didn't.
Well, Livy even says that in the campaigns that are happening at this point in time, Rome is surprisingly successful. Because we've got the other consul taking on the Volscians again, and managing to actually capture Antium, for which he's able to celebrate a triumph.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is like the major Volscian city. So I've got Quintius is going out against the Aequians and the Volscians.
Yes.
He's just heading out in that general southeast direction.
Travel
I find
everywhere.
first.
I feel like the Romans really could set out in any direction at this point in time and they'd run into trouble.
He decides to encamp before Antium. So he gets there, sets up his camp, thinks it's pretty good. And then the Volscii do come out to fight, it would seem. And they seem to have some Aequians with them. It's not really clear how that's working at this stage. But they fight a lot. They fight until midday, apparently.
Yeah.
And that's apparently significant.
Yeah.
It's not really gone into as to how long or when the battle started. Maybe at daybreak. But it's not easy going initially. Excuse me. So there seems to be some parts, because the Aequians are also supporting the Volscii, that the Romans get a little bit caught out.
Yeah, they seem
on
to be
one
a bit
side.
Intimidated as well by the numbers they're facing, perhaps.
Yeah, so there's lots of dead on the field already, and that's always a morale breaker, really.
Such a downer. Such a downer.
Like at a certain point, I've been fighting for hours, and literally, like, there's all of these dead people.
Yeah. When I'm surrounded by dead people, I stop feeling like fighting.
Yeah, I just don't want to anymore, because I think to myself, I'm going to be next.
Yeah.
And Quintius recognizes that this is a problem, and he can see a weak spot on one of the flanks. So he decides to get on his best horse.
Yep.
Fancy. I just have imaginings of what this best horse looks like.
I'm presuming that's the Mr. Ed horse that went out, checking out the surrounding territory before.
He's also providing commentary on the battle. Not necessarily happy to go on this mission, but... So he heads to the right wing, which appears to be the trouble spot.
Okay.
They're facing the most uphill challenge. And then he basically lies to them. He gets there, and Dionysius says he does a rousing speech which ends with an untruth, in order to inspire the confidence of his men.
Yes, I think Livy is alluding to this as well. Is that allowed? Is this like cops, when they're interrogating a suspect, that you're allowed to do that?
Whatever you need to do to get the job done.
Well, I would kind of presume that happens a lot.
You're undercover, buddy.
I would just think that that's kind of what battlefield speeches entail, kind of twisting the truth a little bit to make your men feel better about.
I feel like that's a lot of what speeches are all the time.
Well, yeah, not just military ones, exactly, yeah.
It's always about the agenda.
Well, yeah. Anyway, okay. But this is obviously maybe it's an unusually bad untruth.
# fake news. Don't follow this consul. But he does tell a lie. He says that the other guys on the other side have already put the enemy to flight.
Yeah.
And they're having a great success, and all we need to do is get through this moment and push forward, and we'll be able to join them to celebrate.
And it works.
And it works.
Yeah, the Romans...
Well, he backs that up by hopping off his horse and charging into the enemy.
Oh, well, at least he's ready to put his body on the line.
Dismounts and fights them hand to hand. And I was like, ooh, a big display of virtuous.
Wow. Well, yes. We'll keep an eye on that for later.
Ew, hold on to that little detail. And this is the kind of thing, this level of physical daring and prowess seems to be enough.
Right.
To launch the confidence of all of the characters. So the men on the field are like, yes, all right. And they all charge in with much more vigor and valor than they've ever shown all morning, jumping over the dead bodies, heading towards the enemy.
And this must be why they have such an unusually successful year.
And the Volscians at that point aren't able to keep holding that line and eventually have to run away.
But it does seem like still, even though they're not enjoying a lot of success at the moment, at least according to Livy, they're still getting a lot of people from their territories sort of flooding in and joining them, even at this point in time. And they still seem to be relying on this idea that the Romans might be intimidated by their growing numbers and the fact that they are so outnumbered. They will be so outnumbered on the battlefield. And I guess they're kind of, at least in Livy's account, they're kind of hoping that the Romans might just sort of sneak away in the night.
I don't know if that's going to be necessarily what happens.
Interesting. Yes.
So, I mean, as far as the fleeing backwards and retreating back to the camp, that seems to happen. The Romans don't pursue them once they do that. They let them go.
Right.
They're actually quite tired, it would seem.
Yes.
And, they were spent from their toil. And they needed to collect the dead bodies and tend to their own sick.
Sure, yeah.
So this seems to be part of the standard gentlemanly protocol for ancient battles.
Yes.
Where you do spend time dealing with the dead and you give your enemy to spend time dealing with the dead because actually that's going to become a health hazard.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Amongst other things.
Yeah, and I would presume as well that back in this time there would still be that maybe religious superstition for some people anyway, that's they're giving the dead the correct rites and correct treatment is, what am I looking at? Pious?
Look, I think the last thing you want is to have your army haunted by the dead.
So it is around Halloween.
Who have not been treated properly and deserve their due for dying so bravely.
Yeah.
So there is another battle around the Roman camp. So the Volsci come back.
Yeah.
And they're like, how about it? It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And this time it's pretty clear that the Aequians have definitely joined the Volsci.
Right, okay. Yes, these would be the growing numbers.
Yeah, so we've got this sense of growing numbers, and the reason why this battle takes place at all is because the Volscians and the Aequians together realize that their forces are about 5 times larger than the Roman encampment.
Wow.
Yeah. And also that the Roman encampment, because it was set up originally to just be outside of Antium, it's not in the greatest spot for a camp. It was designed to be a camp that would allow them easy access to the city, not necessarily defensive in the field itself.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And so this sets up a sense of confidence in the Volsci Aequii.
Well, I don't really blame them, but it seems that luckily, Quintius seems to be managing the situation quite well in that he doesn't seem to be allowing the Romans to let their potential nerves get the better of them at this point in time, at least in my account. And they seem to be aiming to keep the Volscians on high alert. That something's about to go down, but when? What will it be? Where will it come from?
They've set up all of these scarecrows around the edge of the camp. They're like, we're watching you.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, and I think they are also sounding off their battle instruments. Basically keeping the enemy. Trying to prevent the Volscians from really getting any sort of rest or repose because they're constantly expecting an attack. That seems to be the strategy, and it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah. So in this, our sources definitely agree.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time trying to track down the reference to the actual time, which was a waste of my time, as it turned out. Because Dionysius says that Quintius bided his time till it was daytime. So they noticed this Aequian Volsci force during the night approaching at some point, and they're on the alert, and they make clear to the enemy that they're awake.
Yes, exactly.
And then they bide their time until the hour of full market. And I was like, the hour of full market, you say? And I was like,
what is that?
I'm like, and so then I spent ages being like, what do the Romans call the hours? What do the ancient Greeks call the hours? I'm guessing full market is sometime around midday, but why not just say noon? And then I'm like, I'm still not sure.
Really? Because I would have thought it would be like maybe early in the morning when they're getting all their stuff.
I feel like it could be any time of the day at this point. Having tried to look into this and narrow it down and not finding anything that was useful to me. Listeners, if you know the answer to what hour of the day is the time of full market, please get in touch.
When Dr. Rad comes to town with her bulk containers, ready to fill them up with lots of chocolate.
We are going to market.
Yeah, that's right.
And so at that point, it seems that the enemy is like lacking in sleep.
Yep.
And not dealing so well with the flying missiles that are now coming at them. And it's at this point that the Romans decide to like strut out of their camp.
Yes.
We're like, hey, hey guys.
Look at us, all ready for battle in our armor. Mm-hmm.
Sallying out with the flower of my horse.
Yeah.
This guy can talk.
Yeah, and that, again, seems to intimidate the Volscian Aequian force into believing that the Romans are more numerous than they had originally thought. So actually, their tactic has backfired.
They're like, those guys must have some people coming to join them.
They couldn't seriously just be strutting around like that.
Nobody comes out in that kind of breastplate unless they mean business.
Yes, that's right.
And so,
we thought we had 5 times as many men, so they must be far more numerous than we'd originally
maybe I
anticipated.
just think I have more men because I haven't had any sleep. So they hold out for a while. But they decide to retreat up a hill and get out of the way. And this means that they've got to reorganize their battle lines.
Yep.
It gives the Romans more time.
Yep.
Never give the Romans more time. And that's always dangerous. So the Romans head up the hill, and while that struggle is taking place, and that seems to go on for most of the rest of the day.
Right.
And eventually the Volscia and Aequians have to get off the hill. They're like, this is a disaster. We should never have come up this hill in the first place.
It's
so
weird.
tired.
Usually the hill is, like, being on higher ground is good. What is going on?
It's not really specified, you know. I mean, sometimes you get a lot of detail about the tactics involved, and we don't for this, really. We just hear that the Romans are relentless in their pursuit. And, you know, the combination of all of these factors, the tiredness, the persistence.
I think the Romans have basically used their
They've psyched them
charisma.
out.
Yeah. Psychological warfare.
Yeah. And
Circa 460 BC.
so the Romans follow them. Eventually they retreat back to wherever their camp was.
Right.
So
As in the Romans or the Volscians?
the Volscii
Right,
and the
right.
Aequians.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because their
Yeah.
camp was somewhere else. It wasn't Antium. It was elsewhere.
Right, yeah.
Presumably combining the forces together meant they had to meet somewhere outside of Antium.
Right, okay.
Even though the Romans are camped outside of Antium.
You know, this place.
you know.
Yeah.
And they take the camp. The Romans take the camp by storm.
Nice.
Not a literal storm.
This time they're allowed
This time,
to. It's a
they
good
take it.
storm.
Yeah. They seize all the things.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think that's about as much detail as I have. Is there any more detail you would like to add to that?
Oh, well, look, I think I might have a little bit. Just
good.
Yeah.
Because Livy kind of ends with this campaign.
Oh, okay. So once they take this camp,
Right,
then they turn their attention to the actual siege of Antium.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So Antium is apparently 30 stades distant from wherever this camp is, which...
Yeah.
And when I looked into it, because I was like, ooh, distances, ooh. Nobody can agree on that either. A stade is the traditional length of a Greek stadium.
I was going to say, I have heard of this.
Yeah,
measuring,
but it does vary as well. And so we think it's anywhere between about 150 metres and about 210 metres.
Which, if you have 30, is quite a lot.
Yeah, it's a
when you
big
add it up.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I narrowed it down to approximately 6 kilometres.
Okay, yes.
And so there are some Aequian reinforcements in Antium, and this becomes part of the problem of the siege. Because it's the Volscian city.
Right, yes.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, some
Okay.
problems. And so these Aequians in the city are guarding the walls.
Right.
So there seems to be clearly an agreement between these guys that has
Yeah.
gone beyond just setting up an army together.
Yeah,
Because there's some
and fighting.
Aequii in the Volscian
Yeah,
city.
like tag teaming the Romans.
Yeah, but they see the Romans coming for the walls, and they're like, you know what? It's not my city. I like you guys, but I really need to go home.
Ouch.
Yeah. So they attempt to leave Antium.
Yes, okay.
And the
yeah.
Volscii are not very happy with that.
No.
They're like, you cannot leave our city.
Especially when you're, guarding the walls. Kind of crucial job, guys.
Yeah. I thought we were allies now. So it seems like the Volscii are probably pretty upset and hurt by this turn of events.
Yeah,
Being like,
yeah.
we trusted you with our city walls.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to run away when the Romans are coming.
I do see where they're coming from here.
Yeah. So this leads to a whole bunch of confusion, and it means that Antium ultimately has to capitulate to the Romans.
Right, okay. Yeah.
But
Big blow.
Dionysius positions this narrative as something where it's a problem because the Volscii and the Aequii haven't really sorted out their own connection with each other.
Yes.
So whatever that connection is hasn't been fully solidified.
It's a good relationship for us all to keep in mind before you overly commit. Make sure you're both on the same page.
Don't put your new friend in charge of your city walls. Give them, don't put them into a high managerial position first.
No.
Start them low and build them up from there.
That's right.
Let's see how it goes.
There's something to be said for earning your place in any new organisation.
Yes. So the surrender of Antium is, as you say, the thing that gives
Huge.
Quintius his triumph.
Yeah.
Fancy pants.
Well, after knowing all the details, I really can appreciate how much he deserves it.
Oh, look.
Because the Romans, once again, if things had gone a different way, the Romans might have found themselves wiped out, it would seem. If only they didn't have so much confidence in themselves.
I'm just going to sally out of my camp.
Yeah. Just walk around like
bold move. It makes you think this narrative is perhaps not to be believed.
Why, Dr. G, I don't know what you mean. Well, is that perhaps a good time to pause and round up with the partial pick?
I think so. Let's do it.
Just as well, because guess who just flew in? Oh, the talons. It's Igor.
Quick. Was that a bird you saw?
It was a plane.
Oh.
So, partial pick where we round up our episode. What's our first category for today?
All right. Our first category is for military clout.
Well, given that last escapade, I feel like the Romans are doing pretty well this week.
As soon as you hear the phrase flower of the horse, you know something's going well for the Romans.
It started off a bit weak, a little bit of, I don't know, it's almost like they're playing tag.
But it's only because the other guys won't come out and fight.
No, I know, but I'm just like, it's not the best. But then it ends with a super impressive capture of Antium. So I'm actually thinking like it has to be like an 8.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Are you going to be the person who's adding this up? Because I'm terrible with numbers.
That's okay, no. Performance maths anxiety is a real thing.
Oh, yeah. No, I have all sorts of maths anxiety.
Yeah, okay. So I reckon an 8.
8, yeah.
I'm in. That?
Yeah. And then we move on to diplomacy.
Ooh.
Well, that's pretty low on the table right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's not really any negotiating happening, is there?
I don't think we can give any gold eagles for diplomacy.
Sadly, no. Next time, Romans.
Expansion.
Ooh, well, there has been some captured territory happening.
Hey, they did just take the major Volscian city.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't know, what do you reckon, like a 6 or 7?
Ooh. Yeah, see, I was going with 5, so I'll meet you at 6
okay,
if you
6,
like.
Let's do 6. I just feel like it has to be, it is quite a big deal. It's not just like burning houses, taking cows.
Yeah, but geographically, small area, but qualitatively important.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, it's for the symbolism. I feel like you've got to get them over 50. Yeah. All right. Okay.
6 it is. Virtus.
Once again, there's been a few incidences of this. We have the random brave soldiers who apparently helped out during the Battle of the Sabines earlier on, although they are not named. That was good.
Can you be great and have no name? Yes, you can.
Yes, you can, yeah. And then, of course, a lot of good stuff with Quintus getting a triumph and whatnot.
Yeah, look, he lied, but it worked.
Yeah, and do you think Dionysius is bringing it up? Do you think he was just bringing it up as a tactical thing, or do you think he was bringing it up to tell him off?
No, it seemed like the narrative was quite neutral around it.
Okay, yeah, I felt that too. Okay, so like what, like a 6 or a 7?
I reckon a 7.
A 7. All right, let's do it. Oh my god, the Romans might actually pass. Oh wait, I always forget what this last category is.
The last category, and one that's a bit tough and has been tough for a while, the citizen score.
Yeah, look, I know that you don't have all, the complete picture that I have, but on the basic details that Livy provides, which admittedly is next to nothing, it seems that the citizens are very unhappy still and feeling very underrepresented and ignored. So much so that they seem to think the patricians won't notice if they don't turn up to elections.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
I think that bespeaks a citizen score below 5.
Yeah, for sure.
Roman patricians, you just failed all of your population.
Well, and this is the thing, even though we haven't really talked about it much because it's not explicitly mentioned in the sources, if the Romans are away at war, then that must mean people are being rounded up for service in the army, even though at home their concerns are not being addressed. So I feel like there's going to be some good old-fashioned plebeian discontent happening.
Oh, just
I
wait.
feel like it's a 0. I feel like it's got to be a 0.
Ooh.
Too harsh?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I'm happy to agree because I feel like the only time that the citizens are getting a look in from a plebeian perspective maybe is these unnamed soldiers who do some good stuff.
True.
And it's like, well, they're doing all right, but they're being forced into doing a thing that perhaps they don't really want to do. And this has been the case for a lot of this warfare. And even if they do sign up to it, they're not getting any of the benefits of the expansion when it happens.
And they're also unnamed.
Unnamed.
I
suppose we can blame our elite source material for some
could
of that.
be, but I mean...
But it just doesn't seem to be a great time to be a Roman citizen of the plebeian class.
Yeah, I definitely think not. Okay, cool. All right, so that gives us, according to my calculations, a grand total of 21 golden eagles.
I want to call it the Scoto from now on.
Do you know, I don't know why. This is so random. I can't believe I'm about to admit this on the podcast. I was thinking of the word scrotum, and I don't know why. I think I was thinking...
All of these golden eagles come together to make one Roman scrotum.
I think I was thinking the Romans are dicks.
I think that's a fair call at this stage. We do like Roman history, but boy, do they have a lot to learn.
So before I say anything even more inappropriate, we should perhaps just say farewell. We hope you'll join us next time.